like us with a very warm, big round of applause to welcome the Deputy President of the Republic of South Africa. I would also like to acknowledge here with us this evening, Wits Vice Chancellor Professor Adam Habib. A very good evening to you, Prof. And the Head and Director of the Wits Business School, Professor Wendy Ngoma. A very good evening again, Prof.
I just want to say again, thank you for coming this evening and listening to one of our leaders in this country, and hoping that we will use this platform not just to listen, but also to engage and dialogue with him.
But we also think that it's important to do one other thing, and that is to be at the heart of public discourse, to be the institutional interlocutor where conversations happen. Conversations between business and labor, conversations between business, labor, and the state, conversations between different forms of stakeholders, conversations between students and alumni, conversations between staff. And that's what this purpose of tonight's event is. It's to create a space, a free space, where members of the corporate sector, members of our staff, our alumni and our students, and the broader public can engage the Deputy President and engage him on the big issues of the day.
A topic that ties in neatly with this historical imperative for all of us to continue building a united, democratic, non-racial, non-sexist, just and prosperous society. I've thus chosen to reflect on the topic, how can we heal our country in all aspects for the sake of our future and economy. I will try to narrow down my focus on the following broad questions. 1, what is the nature of our current economic dilemma? 2, how can our nation improve labor productivity to meet the needs of economic growth and development? 3, what role can the university play in South Africa's reconstruction and development ambitions? And 4thly, can the private sector do more than it is currently doing to help South Africa achieve its set goals? However, owing to the structural defects within our economy, this growth of the middle class has not resulted in the conditions necessary to place us on a higher growth trajectory. Compounding matters in this regard is that there is little investment in new production, and our economy tends to be consumption-driven. In fact, some observers have even posited the argument that the country is rapidly deindustrializing, with the financial and other service-orientated industries assuming a central role in the economy. The consumption sector, which is less labor-intensive, is currently contributing 65 up to 70% to our GDP. Production-led sector growth remains relatively flat, with more jobs being lost over the past 10 years. In the light of this multiplicity of economic challenges, what is to be done? While a host of interventions have been suggested to address South Africa's labor productivity and economic productivity generally, education remains all-important as the long-term solution. The structural nature of our historical and current disability dictates that more attention be paid to producing a capable generation of young people armed with the requisite skills geared to the needs of the economy. And this reality places enormous responsibility on government and all its social partners to pay particular attention to education, especially at the primary and secondary school levels. Stripped of its hyperbolic flourish, Sir Oliver Wendell's advice that, and I quote, a child's education should begin at least 100 years before he is born, close quote, is incontestable. The world over, much premium is put on the quality of education. Modern societies succeed or fail to the extent to which their education systems respond to development imperatives. Recently, I was encouraged by the launch of the Curtis Mpondo Professional Development Institute by the South African Democratic Teachers Union. The Curtis Mpondo Professional Development Institute focuses on skills development and training of teachers to enhance their productivity levels. Initiatives of this nature, especially coming from education stakeholders, give us hope about the future of our education. Universities need to contribute to the faster growth of a green economy. The goal for cohort enrollment in universities must grow from the present mean of 17% to a mean rate of 30% by 2030. That is in the next 18 years. The National Development Plan has laid out the parameters within which each social partner can make a contribution towards the achievement of our shared vision. This shared vision entails the reduction of poverty, stimulating economic growth, effecting economic transformation, and creating employment. Such areas where companies usually stand to benefit are enhanced brand image. Customers are usually drawn to brands and companies considered to have good reputations in corporate social responsibility. Increased sales and customer loyalty. There is a growing market for the products of companies perceived to be socially responsible. It is therefore in the interests of the private sector, and indeed all of us, to work towards alleviating these conditions and to create a sustainable economic outlook on the back of which reconstruction and development can be advanced. As I conclude, I would like to call on all South Africans, social partners, to remain highly conscious of our role at this stage in the historical development of our country. While government has to lead the way in all respects, we also need the private sector and higher education to help us clear the way to the future in keeping with the edicts of our vision to create a united, democratic, non-racial, non-sexist, just and prosperous society. And I thank you for your attention. I think we've got to invest in teacher training colleges, recruit the best professors, to train teachers who would be able to teach the new curriculum. I think the teachers also were not helped by the fact that we've kind of experimented. You remember we introduced the outcome-based system and discovered that after a while that, in fact, the teachers were not trained to implement such a system. So we've done away with it, and in the process, the basic education is disrupted in that fashion.
Right.
The teachers don't understand the subjects that they are expected to explain to and impart to learners. So that's where we have a problem, and that is why the initiative by the South African Democratic Teachers Union to establish the Institute for improving the knowledge of teachers is to be welcomed from that point of view. And I'm convinced that the only way to do it is to take a long-term view, open up teacher training colleges, recruit the best teacher trainers from all over the world, if we can, and invest in producing new generation of teachers. That's the only way in which we will be able to solve this problem. Our message still remains that of prevention, and we are not winning because we're still getting new infections. And the people who are the main victims in this regard are young girls. It's a girl child. Because when we look at their counterparts, boy children, they are not positive. But the girl child seems to be, the main victim in this regard. And it is clear to the SANAC structures that this has a lot to do with this whole intergenerational relationships. So the notion of sugar daddies should be fought and exposed everywhere, because they are the ones who are responsible for spreading the disease. We have paucity of skills, we have this challenge of the basic education not working that well. And this was tested. I mean, when the outcome-based system was introduced, they only complied with the administrative requirements. And for them to be able to comply with the administrative requirements, it meant they don't teach. So all of their time was spent in trying to satisfy the boxes administratively. The teachers, who are activists, they do the barest minimum because they satisfy the requirements, of compliance, but they don't teach because, it demands a whole lot of time for them to do both. And that is why that system had to be abandoned. We can fix this if we appoint principals of these schools who are not dependent for their recommendation on the teachers' union. Because everywhere, in any sector, if management and the unions are one and the same, we run into all manner of difficulties.
So there are solutions to these particular problems. And I thought that your questions would not be to reduce the problems of education to the teachers. Maybe the right question would have been, do all stakeholders play their role? Rather than shifting the blame to this one and that one, do all stakeholders play their role? But if you look at Germany, I'm trying to link education and employment. Vocational education is so central. The issue of skills training. The question, what can be done to change the attitude towards vocational education, which we call it FET today? Because people who are full here, most of them, they want their kids to go to university. They hardly talk about what we call vocational education, which is very central to skills development.
All right, no, thanks.
It seems to me that there's three fundamental problems if you tackle teaching. One is training. As the Deputy President said, a large number of teachers are not adequately trained to teach the subject. The second is discipline. Actually, you can't get teaching done unless teachers sit in the bloody classroom for 6-7 hours of the teaching period. And that's not happening. In many cases, we know that's not happening. We go to schools and people are standing up. The third thing is what the Deputy President says. We need to attract the best candidates to teaching. At this very moment, the only group of stakeholders that want to become teachers, can you guess who it is? White Afrikaner women. First preference teaching. Everybody else, teaching is their last preference. One of the biggest problems in South Africa is that actually higher education was a racialized product. Let me be blunt, white people went to university. Black people were either unemployed, they became teachers or priests, or they landed up in vocational training. Which means the large majority of black students don't want to go for vocational training. If you look at the large number of technical universities in this country, they don't want to be technical universities. If you ask them what they want to be, they want to be UCT. That's the problem. In the high, there is no commitment to differentiating higher education. There is no commitment to getting black students and saying, actually, vocational training as a technical plumber or a boiler maker, something is a job that's worth taking on because you can get a good job. In Germany, it's not a problem. If you're a young white staff citizen or a young black citizen, you think that that's a job you could do because that's a job you can get. And that culture change is what we have to fundamentally change. And that's what we haven't done. I will say one final thing, Chair. State-owned enterprises under apartheid. Every state-owned enterprise, Eskom, Transnet, all of them, had a responsibility to train vocational. They had boilermakers, plumbers, all of artisans. They had a responsibility. What did we do in '94? We closed that down. Why? Because we were so focused on state-owned enterprises making a profit. We closed the one thing that had a developmental effect.
The issue of leadership. I think the Deputy President spoke about this in terms of municipalities, but it applies in education as well in this particular case, where it became very clear that unless there was a clear separation of politics and administration, that otherwise the continuous process of the two influencing each other, that with the capital P in politics, administration becomes a small letter. So you need a balance between politics and administration.
Social grants are an important response to abject poverty. We have today 15 million South Africans who receive social grants of one kind or the other. And quite clearly, it is not sustainable because the pool from which the revenue is extracted is narrower relative to the numbers that are dependent on social grants. But it's absolutely important to continue with the social grants because there are households which have absolutely no possibility of any other form of income other than social grants. So they are an important intervention from that point of view.